Nervous system regulation is something that's become a really big topic in recent years. And nervous system regulation is huge. It's critical. However, this what I'm going to talk about today is how nervous system regulation is actually not the answer. But first, I want to talk about how the importance of nervous system regulation, why it's important, and why it's often the first step in really creating new results in your life, especially if you're somebody who's done a lot of healing work, therapy, and things like that, and you're not seeing the results that you want. So we live in a world where our systems are put into, two states. We're put in a fight or flight state pretty much on a constant basis. Fight or flight state pretty much in a constant basis. So what do I mean by that? Even small things, right? So it can be things that seem relatively small, such as news stories, and the headlines being incredibly inflammatory, and the words that are used in the headlines cause our system to have a strong reaction. This is done intentionally, so that we read the news story. And also, what happens when we see those words that are things like danger and horror and horrific and the economy is failing, is that it creates an emotional response. And I had a client once actually who was struggling with anxiety, and that was one of the number one things. She was a young person and she really wanted to decrease her symptoms of anxiety. And I discovered that. So first we started looking at different tools and practices and things that she can do, meditations and breathing, etc. And then through working together, I discovered that she had notifications on her phone, not just from one news source, but multiple news sources. So that within an hour, she was getting at least every 10 minutes, like 5 messages an hour. That's every 12 minutes, but multiple times within a short period of time, she was getting notifications. And she was the kind of person who would look at her notifications. By the way, all my notifications on my phone are off. So I only get notifications when I choose to look at my phone, which I highly recommend, but that's not the point of the story. So she was somebody who had notifications turned on her phone. And so every 10 minutes, she was getting a hit. And of course, a notification, but a hit in her system. Because of course, the news headlines, which is what she was getting, were like, terrorist on the subway or, things like that. And your system's like, what? There's a terrorist? And then 10 minutes later, the stock market is crashing. And what that does is it creates our systems to be in a constant state of fight or flight. Now, that's just one example. And for so many people have experienced also trauma, and so they're in hypervigilance. Hypervigilance keeps you in fight or flight. There's a variety of examples and reasons that your body might be in fight or flight. So our bodies were not designed to be in fight or flight constantly. Fight or flight is a response that helps us, that supports survival. That's the bottom line, right? So you're going about your life, and your system is in a state of calm. It's in your the part of your nervous system that equates with rest and relaxation. That's supposed to be our baseline. And, we're moseying along, we're eating, we're hunting, we're sleeping, we're cuddling with our tribe. And then all of a sudden there's a danger, right? So there's a predator that's coming to attack us. There's maybe it's even a prolonged danger, like drought. Drought might put us in fight or flight because we're having to find food, and there might be fear that there isn't enough food. So that might be an example of a prolonged fight or flight situation. But nevertheless, our systems are designed to be in a state of calm productivity or calmness. And then when we need to hunt, when we need to protect, when we need to find food, then our systems go into fight or flight response. And actually, to be really accurate, there's sort of this, we're talking about productivity. There's a state sort of in the middle, like just before fight or flight and a little bit after sort of calm and rest and relaxation. That's our peak performance, our peak productivity, right? So we also need to be in that complete calm state in order to recover and rest. Okay, so why is this important? This is important because in our modern day, our nervous systems are constantly in fight or flight. This creates all kinds of problems. It creates health problems. It creates things like anxiety, even depression, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia. All kinds of things can be attributed to our systems being out of balance, and specifically our systems being in fight or flight. And now if we look at that from the space of trauma, when the way that we release trauma from our systems and come into a place of that calm productivity that I was just referencing, we first need to feel safe in our systems. And so if we're in this constant state of fight or flight, we're not in that state of what I'm going to call calm productivity. So that's just a general explanation of anybody in modern society being in fight or flight and how it can impact their health and their productivity, their ability to create. Now, if you're somebody who's experienced trauma and now your system is in a state of fight or flight, the way that we are able to release and process trauma, we must first feel safe in our systems, safe in our bodies. This is why often when I work with clients, one of the first things that often needs to happen, one is connecting with your body. So many people are disconnected from their body, and that's because it's not safe. It's not safe in there. There's all kinds of memories and things that we know that we don't want to know, and things that happen that we don't want to look at. It's not safe in there. So we have to create safety in order to be able to connect with the body. Then we need to be able to create safety and maybe the same in the same way. It could be two different processes, but create a sense of safety to be able to look at to be able to release the trauma, which sometimes is looking at it. We don't always necessarily have to we don't need to relive a trauma in order to release it, but we do need to create a place of safety so that anything that's stored in your system can be released. So release cannot happen without that sense of safety, because the safety creates this relaxing and this opening, and then that allows the things in our body to be released. So when we're in a state of fear, fight or flight, even shutdown, which is fight or flight, or freeze or fawn, right? All four of those. So it's not always fight or flight. But when we're in that heightened state of preservation, there's actually a lot of constriction and holding on. We don't have time to relax and let go. We need to protect ourselves in some way. That's what that fight or flight response is. So in order to heal from trauma, oftentimes the first two steps oftentimes are connecting with your body. And if you're somebody who's disconnected from your body, connecting with your body and creating a space of safety within your body, within your emotions, within your energy body, within all the layers, creating a sense of safety to it, which will then allow that trauma to be released. So how do we do that? One of the ways is nervous system regulation. If your nervous system is in a state of fight or flight, then you're not in a place of safety, right? So oftentimes step one is nervous system regulation. And that's why one of the reasons, or in my opinion, why it's become so popular and such a buzzword, because it's something that we don't do globally as a collective. We are all in a state of fight or flight on some level, living in a modern world. We simply are. So one is something that we don't do, and two, it's something that's needed. It's something that's needed in order to support healing, whether it's emotional healing or physical healing. Here's the epiphany that I've had, which is why nervous system regulation doesn't work. So this has come up for me in my personal life, and then also in assessing what's happening with my clients, because nervous system regulation is something that I do a ton of for the past probably 10 years through a variety of ways: breath work, meditations, somatic practices, cold plunges, warm plunges, all the things. And I can see symptoms in my body that I'm like, my body seems to be not feeling calm and safe all the time, not to the level I would expect it to be. And I looking at clients that are doing nervous system regulation practices, and I can see that they're still in a state of dysregulation. And I'm like, what is happening here? What is happening is that it's like a boat that's sinking, or a boat, I won't say that's sinking. It's like a boat that's taking on water, and we're sitting there with a bucket and we're taking out water. Now, if the amount of water that's coming in is equal to, or maybe even less than, the amount of water that you're able to scoop out with the bucket, your boat's going to float. So if that's you, so if the amount of stress, let's say stress that's coming in is less than or equal to the amount of nervous system regulation that you're doing, then you're going to feel good. And you're going to be like, wow, nervous system regulation works. This is the best thing ever. Everybody should do it. I think everyone should do it for the reasons I just shared about the world that we live in. But that's not the point, right? The point is it'll work for you. Now, if the amount of water that's coming into the boat is a little bit more than the amount that you're able to take out with your bucket. You might be like, oh, I feel pretty good, but I'm still feeling a little stressed. Or like, I keep doing personal development to release my trauma, but like I can feel that it's still there. Why is it still there? And then, of course, as you can imagine, another option might be the water that is coming in. It is like a freaking, gushing in, and you've got this little toy bucket. Even if you have a giant bucket, right? This is not about the size of the bucket. This is about the amount of water that's coming in. You're like scooping it out, and you're like, I'm sinking, literally sinking. You're like, I'm doing all the nervous system right. I'm doing all the things. I have a ginormous bucket. Maybe I have 10 buckets, but I'm still feeling my system. I can see that my system is still stressed, right? This person that's scooping out the water. It's because we're not plugging up the holes. Now, sometimes the holes can't be plugged in the sense of there are stressors in our life that are going to come in, right? And so that's why I think everyone would benefit from doing nervous system regulation, because we all have a certain amount of water that's going to be coming in. And we need to be doing maintenance. This is more like, maintenance kind of thing. It's more like it's raining than it is that your boat has holes, right? It's raining. And we want to capture that water and get it out of our boat. So that's why that's why it's such a big thing right now, is that everyone can benefit from it, because the world that we live in, it is raining. It's raining stress. Right now, if you're somebody who maybe you've got something really big going on, like your child is in distress, your child is self-harming, you've lost a job, you're in financial distress, that's a lot of water coming in. And you may need to increase your nervous system regulation, i.e. your self-care, your support, the size of your bucket. You're going to need to increase it while that's happening, while you're in it. Now, if you are somebody that's experienced a lot of childhood trauma that's still present, and you've got stressful things happening, your child is in distress, you're in financial difficulty, and you've got childhood trauma, maybe you're isolated for whatever reason, maybe you don't have a support network, the water is gushing in. What can I do about that? Like, okay, Veronika, no amount of nervous system regulation. So this was the epiphany, right? Of why is it that sometimes it doesn't work? And it's because no amount of scooping out the water is going to be enough. We have all those different factors. So what is the solution to that? The solution is you get out of the boat, or you take your boat out of the water, however you want to look at it. What does that mean? What that means is, okay, first let me back up again, talk a little bit about trauma. We now know that trauma is not about an event, but it's about your body's response to an event. So there are first responders who are trained in managing their systems during a first response event. Or even, this also is applied to like soldiers, where they're able to train their bodies through things like breath work and mindfulness and a lot of things that we talk about when it comes to nervous system regulation. They train their bodies to not take on a negative message from an event that they're responding to. So from these programs, we know that doing, I want to call it nervous system regulation, can actually completely avoid or reduce the experience of trauma in a person's body. So the question becomes less about how can I manage my nervous system, and more about how can I prevent or support my body or my system in not experiencing this, whatever this is, as trauma in the first place. And related to that, and perhaps deeper than that, or more important than that, is what is happening in my system that's causing me to be in a state of fight or flight already. So if we go back to the boat metaphor, perhaps it's less about water gushing into the boat, which would be new things coming in, right? So in this metaphor, it would be new stress or new traumas coming in. And it's more about the fact that there's water in the boat already, right? So if there's already water in the boat and now more water is coming in, the boat's going to sink, or it's not going to function. The boat's not going to function. So doing nervous system regulation practices on a regular basis can really help with calming yourself, creating safety in your body, but also sort of, collecting in a bucket that the new water that's coming in and releasing it so that it doesn't get stuck in the boat. And so what do you do with the water that's already in the boat? What do you do with the water that's already in the boat? So that's where it's important. That's where I had this epiphany of like nervous system regulation doesn't work. Because what we need to do is understand, why does the body believe that it needs to be in a state of fight or flight as its baseline? Right? So I'm not talking about the baseline that's created as a result of our world of conditioning. I'm talking about a baseline that maybe you brought into this lifetime, and or a baseline that was created because of early life experiences. And so now you have this baseline of fight or flight, or this baseline of hypervigilance, this baseline of your nervous system being elevated. And that's where it becomes important to understand, how can I get to a baseline where my baseline is a normal, regular, what we were intended, how we were intended to be as our baseline. And it's going to be different for different people. So I want to give an example. The realization that I had about myself is I had this deeply ingrained fear of betrayal. So in my case, it was, without going into details, it wasn't an obvious betrayal. Like, my partner, had a whole other family and left me for this other family, right? That would be an example of a really obvious betrayal. Or my business partner, I've been in business with this person for 20 years, and now all of a sudden they threw me under the bus. They took the business, took my money, and now I'm without a source of income, and I'm without a source of income because my business partner took everything that we built together, right? Betrayal, obvious betrayal. I would call that, and that's an acute event. It's an event that happened. Your body's going to respond to it. You're going to have acute stress as a response to that event, right? So for me, it was more about, there are many layers of it. So the cosmic betrayal, past life betrayal, and then also subtle betrayal. So this is where an image that I love that was released, that was used to portray domestic violence. At least that's where I saw it. It may have been used in other places. Because it was in response to the question, why do people stay in abusive relationships, right? And it showed this faucet dripping. It's just like a little bit of water. Funny that's water again. A little bit of water, a little bit of water. And over time, all of a sudden, the person who's experiencing domestic violence is in a home that's filled with water, right? And they're like drowning, or they're swimming in the water. If water was gushing in, if water was gushing in, the person wouldn't stay in that home, right? So that was the comparison in that image of domestic violence. Even physical violence is rarely all bad. Otherwise, people wouldn't stay. People don't. Right? So it's this drip, drip, drip of abuse, and that was definitely my experience with narcissistic trauma in my marriage. It was this drip. It was this very small at the beginning, very small drip, and then over time, all of a sudden, you're like, what am I in? Like, what is happening? What happened? How did I get here? And it's because it was small. And so the type of betrayal I'm talking about was like that. It was like, so it's just like small betrayal, small betrayal, small betrayal, small betrayal. And then over time, on an unconscious level, because so this is imprinting, right? Over time, on a subconscious level, my system is like, oh my gosh, I need to be concerned and aware of the potential of betrayal. And that betrayal can look any kind of way. And all of a sudden, the system is constricted. The system, in my case, was controlling because it wants to protect myself from betrayal. And so now I'm in a state of, I'm going to say hypervigilance, or at least maybe not hypervigilance in the sense that I was consciously, literally vigilant, but more in this heightened nervous system state, because I'm constantly in a state of protection. And even as I'm talking about it right now, I feel my whole body tightening. My legs are tightening. My arms are closing in. My arms are tightening. I'm covering my chest. Like literally as I'm sitting here talking about this, my body's responding in that way. So that fear of betrayal was causing constriction. It was causing heightened nervous system. And as long as that fear of betrayal is present, no amount of nervous system regulation is going to bring me back to baseline. The nervous system regulation may get me to a space of new stuff coming in doesn't affect me, or does it make things worse, right? Does it make things worse? But it doesn't resolve the baseline. Because it's like, again, the water is like constantly coming in because the fear of betrayal is there. So as long as the root cause is there, the root cause in this case being fear of betrayal, as long as that root cause is there, my nervous system is going to be heightened. So what we need to do is find the root cause and be able to release it. So if you're someone who's done a lot of work and you're like, I don't understand why I've done all the personal development work, I'm a yogi, maybe I'm a healer, I do breath work, do all the things, and my body has symptoms that are telling me that my nervous system is not okay, or I'm continuing to experience things in my world, patterns, maybe patterns of lack, patterns of scarcity, maybe patterns of relationships not being reciprocal, maybe a pattern of not being seen, feeling like you're invisible to the world. So these kinds of patterns, and it could be physical, it could be, it could be chronic health issues, chronic pain in your muscles, chronic fatigue, low energy. Low energy is a big one, because if your energy is low, that means your energy is being used for something, even if you're not aware of it, right? So in this case, the energy is being used for protection. In the example I gave with the fear of betrayal, energy is being used for protection. So nervous system regulation on its own may not be effective if you have a baseline imprint that's causing your system to constantly be in a state of fight or flight. And so in that case, what's going to be really important is to identify what is the root, what is the belief that you're holding in your system that's causing your system to respond with fight or flight.